Ladies and gentlemen, we have today with us Dr. S. Irudaya Rajan. He's a professor at the Center for Development Studies in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. He has more than 2 decades of research experience in Kerala and has coordinated 6 major migration surveys in Kerala, co-authored with Professor K.C. Zakaria. Dr. Rajan works in areas of population and development, economics of aging, gender and development, international migration, and database on population censuses. He has authored a large number of books. In fact, he has a book coming out just about every year. Is that right, Dr. Rajan? Last year,
called India Migration Report.
Yes, you co-edited 2 books. One was Abuse and Neglect of the Elderly in India, and Climate Change, Vulnerability, and Migration. In 2018, you had a book on migration, gender, and care economy. Then you authored a book on politics of migration, Indian emigration in a globalized world. And you have not confined your studies to Kerala only, because I found that you have a book on migration, mobility, and multiple affiliations concerning Punjabis in a transnational world. So I don't want to go on more on these because you have a large number of books and any number of articles in the economic and political field. Friends, Dr. Rajan has been advising the government of Kerala and the government of India in a large number of issues pertaining to the diaspora, migration, etc. And in these days, the benefits of his wisdom and expertise over about 2.5 decades is being utilized by all the governments. Dr. Rajan, just to give you an idea about the Institute of South Asian Studies, it was set up about 15 years back in the National University of Singapore as a think tank. And its setting up reflects the increasing economic and political importance of South Asia and the strong historical links between South Asia and Southeast Asia, which you have been studying. Now, ISAS is dedicated to research on contemporary South Asia. We seek to promote understanding of this vital region of the world and to communicate knowledge and insights about it to policymakers, academia, the business community, and civil society in Singapore and beyond too. Now, thank you very much for joining us today. We thought we will get the benefit of your experience, your studies, your research in the area, which has attuned a huge amount of importance today. Now, Dr. Rajan, you are aware that countries are passing through exceedingly difficult times. There are pressures on family, community, every organ of state administration, and unprecedented amount of social problems of which you have a very good understanding. Now, we are yet to face the economic impact of COVID-19, as at present all countries are still combating the health-related issues of the problem. The pandemic has unleashed suffering on the populace of an extreme kind. Now, you have studied migration over the last 2 decades. We would like to have the benefit of an overview from you about the situation as it is unfolding. How do you think will it impact India and other countries of the South Asian region, such as Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and even Maldives for that? So we'd love to have your views on this. Dr. Rajan.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, for the nice introduction and also the overview of the issues. In fact, I just want to give you a broad understanding of what's happening globally today. I think right now we are all discussing about between life and death. And maybe after the COVID-19 is over, we'll talk about livelihoods. The livelihoods is basically migration. And in addition to that, this particular COVID-19 is basically a disease of migrants because everybody advising not to move. That means our mobility has been completely winded up. You cannot move between district to district, state to state, country to country. Everything globally it is shut down. That means you can't move. Once people cannot move, you can't make money because the migration money is basically a clear understanding where migrants move to make money. Now they cannot move, then money will be a problem. And this is the general opening remarks I want to say, that we will be talking about livelihood, as you rightly said, economic impact after some time because it's just unfolding. The first point I would like to talk about this in globally by 2020, we are talking about something like 272 million people in the globally who are not living in a place they are not born. It's a big population we are talking about, and it is equivalent to 3.5% of the world population. But if you talk about migrants, because some of them, when you migrate, you take your families, and they are all dependent. But actual migrants, we are talking about 164 million globally. This is the number we are talking about. And if you talk about the number as it is, if you take the first 20 countries in the world with the highest number of migrants, India is figuring out as number 1. And then Bangladesh is figuring as number 6, Pakistan is figuring as number 7, Philippines is figuring at number 9, and Indonesia is number 11. That means first 20 countries, immigrants world, we are already 3 of South Asians are there, the first 10, and then you have Philippines, Indonesia. So we are talking about a large number of people. It's a big number. Now, if we come back to South Asian countries, today India has close to 20 million Indians are currently abroad, still holding Indian passport. We are not talking about Indian diasporas. They may be in many countries, but when we talk about Indian migrants, we are talking about something like 20 million Indians today globally, and Bangladesh we have 10 million, Pakistan 8 million, and Nepal 3 million, and Sri Lanka 2 million, and the Philippines and Indonesia 6 and 5 million each. So we are talking about a large number of people. And in addition to that, what we are talking is most of these countries, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Philippines, and Indonesia, majority of their migrants are found in the 6 countries in the Gulf, which includes Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Kuwait. Of course, we also have a large number of Indians in Malaysia and Singapore. Not very big compared to the Gulf countries, partly because they can become citizenship in Singapore and Malaysia, whereas it is not true in the countries in the Gulf. If you go to Gulf, you have to continue with what is called you have to come back. You get only the worker visa. So we are talking about something like 20 million Indians, and if you combine together, we are talking about this both South Asian and what is called the Philippines and Indonesia. We are talking about something like 50 to 60 million people currently outside the country, and at least half of them, 30 to 40 million people probably in the Gulf countries.
Okay, that's
very big number we are talking about.
Yes, 30 to 40 million is a huge chunk of people in the Gulf countries itself, because displacement of these people from there will reflect hugely upon their economy also. I mean, the countries where they are presently working. Just a word about Kerala now, because you have a huge amount of experience in Kerala. A World Bank survey says that NRI remittances into the country will see roughly a 23% decline, and the decline has started from last month itself, which is possibly the sharpest fall in recent times. Now, obviously, Kerala will be the hardest hit. The largest number of people, maybe it's assessed that there may be about 1 trillion. The decline will be about rupees 1 trillion. Now, what do you expect to be the economic impact of this in terms of remittances and unemployment, considering that Indian origin persons in the Gulf would be about 10 million out of the 30-40 that you just talked about, with Kerala having the largest chunk?
Now, what happened, if you look at India as a country, India is reported as the number 1 in terms of remittances with $80 billion. So India is number 1 in terms of remittances, but the World Bank predicted something like 20% decline. But what we are looking at is Kerala, we are talking about something like 2.5 million people are in the Gulf. That means if you see 4 Indians in the Gulf, 1 is a Malayali. So that is the number we are talking about. That's why the Kerala government is writing to the PM to bring back the Malayalis. So I told them that they have to talk about Indians, but then remaining the whole countries, you have only 7.5, but 2.5 in one state. And the state has only 30 million people. That means at any point of time, 10% of the Keralites are NRKs, non-resident Keralite, at any point of time. Always there is a mobility. And if you include the return migrants, we are talking in Kerala context, we have close to 1.5 million return migrants from the Gulf who were worked in the last 30, 40 years. Because if you go to Gulf, you work for 10 years, 15 years, you eventually you have to return. I think the eventual return is not being talked about in the policy circle, because they think you go there, you make money and that's it. But they never talk about the eventual return, because migration cycle includes preparation to go, working in the Gulf and return back to your own country, either India or Sri Lanka or whichever the country. Now, if you talk about Kerala, we are talking, I think we are estimating right now between 10 to 15% decline of migrants. Please remember, it is the stock of the migrants who send remittances. Remittances is the function of the Malayalis living in the Gulf. If that number is coming down, you expect the remittances to come down. Okay, there is a link between migrants and remittances. If you don't, nobody is there, then there is no money. So we are now predicting at least close to 2 to 3 lakhs Malayalis are likely to return. In fact, I was talking with the Kerala government website. They already reported close to 2 million Keralites want to come back. They have registered with the Kerala government. Of course, now everybody is in panic. They want to come back. But of course, when the flights started coming in, maybe some of them will withdraw because they think it's what I'll do in Kerala. It's not like Kerala is welcoming them, but not welcoming with employment opportunities. They are just welcoming them. You can come, you can be quarantined, we will look after you, but they cannot give you jobs. So I think we are expecting close to 2 to 3 million Malayalis, expect to return back. That means 10 to 15% Malayalis are likely to come back. And if you put that into the remittances front, what we are talking about is basically in 2018 survey, what we did in Kerala, 85,000 crores came annually to Kerala from anywhere in the world. Of course, majority comes from the Gulf because 90% Malayalis are in the Gulf. But what happened in 2018, we had floods. Unprecedented floods came to Kerala in 2018. And then Malayalis were pouring money. Of course, when we imagine the Keralites who are NRKs were helping us, now they are asking us help. It's like giving them back. So we got a lot of money, and the problem was that many migrants who were in Kerala, their whole dream is to construct a house. Some of them lost their house in Kerala. Due to this, there was a forced migration to Gulf. So what we expected that maybe some people will go by 2019 and 20. So we predicted remittances will go from 85,000 crores to 10 to 15% increase of. In 2020, we expected something close to 100,000 crores, which is equivalent to 25% of the Kerala state income. But because of the COVID-19, we are now projecting that the remittances will be back to square one. That means the remittances in 2020 will be equivalent to remittances in 2018, 85,000 crores. That means we are expecting 15% decline. Now, what it means to Kerala? Problem is, when we talk about 3 lakhs Malayalis are coming back, it is not 3 lakhs Malayalis, 3 lakhs families. Because one Malayali support 4 people at home. His parents or his wife and children. So one supporting 4. That means we are talking about 12 lakhs people will be suffering, or 1.2 million people in Kerala will be affected directly by the returns. Directly. Indirectly, of course, there will be a lot of things. Remittances impact, there will be construction will be off. Many houses will be off constructed. It will be never completed because the money is not coming. So you will see a lot of incomplete projects in Kerala because of the remittances decline. But at least 3 lakhs families will be directly affected, and it has both economic implications, social implications, psychological implications, even political implications, because they can vote. Election is going to come in 2021. Which is also important, because the election is important because these migrants can vote. And even today in the assembly, we have 6 MLAs who are return migrants. So the migrants can play a big voting force in Kerala, because we are talking about 3 million people coming back, but we are talking about 20 lakhs people in the Gulf. They can all tell their family members, please vote for this political party. That party can come to power, because 20 lakhs people and then their family members included, we are talking about 8 million voters. 20 lakhs Malayalis in the outside, and they tell their family members, please vote for this party. They've given us something when we are in crisis. So you are talking about 8 million voters, and that can be decisive vote for the any political party. So the political parties are even competing each other in Kerala to please the migrants. That's why you can see that the political parties, because the election year is next year, not very far. Because whatever you do, there will be, because the memory will go. But now what they do today will be remembered in 2021. What they did not do in 2018 flood time, maybe it is already forget about that. We are all always forgetting things about the past, but this is still in their memory, 2020 COVID. So it will have an implication for political implications. So it's a very big issue which is emerging in Kerala, but we are asking the Kerala government to come back, not just Kerala government. I think Indian government should come back a policy of return migrants, maybe a big package for rehabilitation and re-employment related issues.
This is very worrisome, because when you look at Kerala, Kerala is a high cost economy. And in terms of state domestic product, Kerala would fall into the fourth or third quadrant, or if all the states were put into 4 quadrants. But at the same time, in terms of purchasing power, Kerala is very high with large amount of disposable income. Now, the picture that you paint, less spending going forward. Government is also very strapped for funds. And if that expenditure does not come, I think livelihoods are going to be impacted in future. And that's why when you talked about fighting for lives just now, in about 3 months from today, or maybe earlier than that, we will be fighting for livelihood, isn't it?
And another point, when you are talking about Kerala, we should not also miss the interstate migrants, because that is something we have a two-way traffic in Kerala. Because as of now, today, Kerala has 20 lakhs. Kerala has 20 lakh people outside the country, but 10 lakh people within the country. Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore. So that they also want to come back now. So you have 30 lakhs Keralite workforce anywhere in the world outside Kerala. But at the same time, we have 30 lakhs other state workers from any part of India. They come because you don't need visa to come from Assam to Kerala. So it's all international, internal flow, like European Union. You can move within the European Union with, Europass. Similarly, within the country, we can move. So automatically, we have something like 30 lakh other state workers are there. Some of them are stranded on the way. Some of them have left before the lockdown. And some of them will leave immediately. Like the Gulf Malayali want to come back. These workers want to go back to Orissa, Rajasthan, UP, and Northeast. Now, this also going to create a lot of vacuum in Kerala's labor force. That means Kerala is going to be affected even because of these workers will leave. So automatically what is going to happen? Kerala economy cannot move further because Pravasis is the lifeline of the economy by sending remittances. The internal migrants were the lifeline who push the economy through their work, through their contribution. So now there is what is called a conflict of interest will come. And I was telling, if the 3 lakhs Malayalis who are going to come back, there will be a vacancy of at least 3 to 5 lakh internal migrants who will be leaving Kerala because of the COVID crisis. They want to go back families. They want to visit their own families. So these 3 lakh people coming in, they can take over the jobs of the migrants, which is available now freely for them. But then they have to adjust to the new way of work, new way of thinking. If they work that, then it will be probably will have much more adjustable economy. Otherwise, Kerala economy will suffer because there will be a labor scarcity created by the interstate migrant leaving Kerala.
What about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal? Because you have just studied Sri Lanka also in detail, and these countries also have a huge chunk of population in the Gulf who are likely to be returning. Now, how does it impact them?
In fact, in 2018 global crisis time, when the global crisis was hit, the Indian government and the ADP and the World Bank funded a study to us. So we visited, we had a partner in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and what is called Sri Lanka, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And we had a meeting in Nepal to bring those researchers. And then we have set up a team to visit all the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman. We produced a larger report. And that time, it was not a global crisis. Though it's called global, it was affected when I went to UAE to study the global crisis. In Dubai, I can see everything is stopped. But I go to Abu Dhabi, business was as usual. So it's not affected by everything. And Saudi Arabia was doing very well. People who lost job in UAE, they moved to Saudi Arabia. Who lost job in UK, they came to Saudi Arabia. But now the COVID is basically a global, real global crisis, not the global crisis we are talking about 2008. So what is going to happen? Now all these countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, including Indonesia and Philippines, they are also going to expect what we are talking about, at least 10 to 20% of their migrants coming back to their countries. 10 to 20%. That means 10 to 20% we are talking about, and then you have a similar cutting in remittances. For example, when you talk about 10% people coming back, you are talking about Nepal, 3 million people, total migrants, compared to we have 20 million migrants. Now 3 million people, we are talking about 30 lakhs, and 3 to 5 lakhs coming to a small economy like Nepal. Or you can talk about something like Sri Lanka. We are talking about 2 million people. Suppose, we are talking about 20 lakhs, 2 lakhs people coming back to Sri Lanka. It will have a massive implications. Compared to India, it is very less, but like Kerala, Sri Lanka, Nepal will be affected much bigger than Kerala. I think it is important for us immediately after COVID-19, we should evaluate it exactly what happened to the international migrant in the Gulf countries, basically the countries of destination and the origin, which includes India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and we should also talk about Indonesia and Philippines, because they're also big labor sending countries, and we should look at it, how many came and what they are doing and what the government is doing for them, because government is keen on sending them. Like for example, look at Philippines, they have lot of money they spend for pre-departure training to send people to other places. Now they are coming back. What policies in place in Philippines and what we can learn from each other, how to work on the eventual return of returned migrants. I think we have to look at it very carefully to do that, like some type of a post-mortem report of COVID-19 on South Asian and the Southeast Asian countries like Philippines and thing, and on the Gulf. Because the problem is Gulf migrants will come back, but then some of them might go also. If the oil price goes up in the next, say, 4 or 5 months, then there will be a demand for labor, because they are mostly linked to oil price. So I think we should wait and see, but I think it is important for the institute where you work to evaluate it maybe after the COVID-19 to understand the impact on COVID on South Asia and its link to what is called the biggest migration corridor in the world today, probably South Asia and Gulf.
I agree, because post this clampdown and lockdown, we'll have to look at it in greater detail. Despite its, community denomination, Maldives does not have a sizable population in the Gulf, isn't it? I found that they have larger numbers in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, Maldives is, for example, Indians, we have 20,000 Indians are in Maldives. It's a small population. Okay. Their population is very less, but it will be affected partly because they are dependent upon the, what is called the tourism. And of course, so tourism right. is the one they make money, and they come for basically the health tourism. For example, today in Kerala, you can go to many hospitals. They have a special wing for Maldives because they get money through that. But unfortunately, now that Maldivians are not able to get their health treatment, that means Maldivian health problem will be much worse. There may be more people dying because they are not getting proper medical treatment, because they used to visit country like India. Kerala, we used to have at least 3 flights every day from Maldives because the visa is free. It's like a free visa, not like India and Pakistan. India and Maldives are very close, like India and Nepal. So we have very close relations. So, but they will affect the health thing. We should also look at the health implication of this COVID. Because, for example, today, if you visit many hospitals in Kerala, the hospitals are vacant. Private hospital, now not many people are there because they are afraid to go to hospital. That means now, because of the COVID, we are seeing there is no other disease in Kerala. What happened to other people rushing to the medical hospitals? Nobody is going. That means they are all holding their disease. They are postponing their treatments. So it will have implications. Like if you don't eat in the morning, you don't in the afternoon, then you go for lunch, then you are postponing your food taking. Similarly, people are postponing their medical treatment in many countries now because they don't want to go to hospital because they are thinking they are going to catch up. Especially the old people. You can't take your old parents if he's not well. You treat at home because if you go there, he's easy to catch the COVID. So I think we should look at that COVID impact also on the, along with the economics and social implication, we should also look at health implication of COVID-19. Also on migrants.
Professor Rajan, you've also talked about a large number of migrants who are in the Gulf without valid documents, especially Kuwait, where you have talked about there could be even up to about 100,000 people over there. But now Kuwait government has come forward with a one-time pardon for these people, and they are likely to be returned. Number one, do you think there's a sizable amount of people who are without valid documents? And number two, if these people also start moving back, then we have a larger number, which probably we had not accounted for earlier.
No, I think this is a very important issue. It is not being addressed in either in the media nor in even the academic domain, because that is why when I told the government that there will be undocumented migrants, because many Indians, many Bangladeshis, many Pakistanis, they are staying there after their visa is over. So you have a large number of people without passport. My estimates, I did a study on that earlier. My estimate indicates we have at least close between 10 to 20% of the South Asians are without proper document. It is applicable to all the countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, because if you have more population, you will have more undocumented. And also, Philippines and Indonesians. But the problem is, every country in the Gulf will announce amnesty every 3 to 4 years, once in 5 years. Because they know that they have undocumented people, because undocumented migrants are basically a parallel labor force. It's like what I call them invisible, or what is called that shadow labor force. Like when you walk when you walk in the afternoon, you see your shadow. You are not there. You are walking, but you can see the shadow. That's a shadow labor market, which is the undocumented worker. But the problem is, when the economy is down and the economy is in crisis, there will be no opportunities for these undocumented workers. So what is going to happen now, because they announced the amnesty in Kuwait, and I'm thinking, and at least other countries in the Gulf like UAE, Saudi, and Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, probably they will announce the amnesty maybe this year. If they announce the amnesty this year, people who have no proper documents, earlier they will say, let us wait for the next amnesty. Now, because of the COVID fear, because without a proper document, you cannot visit any hospital in the Gulf. When you go to hospital, they'll ask you first, give your identity. Identity, not your country's passport. Identity is your identity in the Gulf, not the identity in India. So your passport has no validity. They have to give the, what is called the labor card. If you don't have a labor card, you will not get treatment. I have seen people, I was told by many studies, many friends, if you don't have a paper, there will be no treatment until you produce a paper. And before that, there are people die in Gulf and they don't exist. Even you cannot bring the dead body because officially you don't exist. So I think those people now, because of the fear of the COVID, because the COVID is not going away from us next 3 months. I am sure it will be continuing in another form, some form, maybe 6 to 1 year. So that fear, I think we may expect some more people will come. That is why I added up 10 to 15%. 10% is the normal return and another 5% is the additional return due to the undocumented mobility. I think that's what I'm putting. 10% is the normal, like 2 lakhs for Kerala is normal. Another 1 lakh will be due to the amnesty. And this will be true for all the countries.
Considering the oil prices and the oil shock that the Gulf countries are getting now, the economy being what it is, I worry from what you tell me. Do you think this is going to be an end to immigration from Kerala? Because the Kerala, the normal Malayali, he has got immigration in his blood, in his DNA itself. He looks for some or the other avenue where he can emigrate to. Now, if you think Gulf as a destination for him is not going to offer so many opportunities, do you think he'll be looking for other destinations?
No, I think we have to study the migration history of Kerala. I think that is very important because in 1970s, Malayalis started moving even without proper documents. Some of them went even by the night ship from the coastal belt to the Gulf country because there was no passport, there was no visa. People can get in. So I think Kerala has a long history of migration from 1970 to 2020. When we talk now, we already completed 50 years of international migration dependent on the Gulf countries. So it will not be end. Because end will be very, because you have 20 lakhs people. They are not going to come anyway. So at least maybe even you say 3 to 5 lakhs people even come, you have 15 lakhs left. Because the problem is Malayalis have a lot of network. So Malayalis, what they are likely to do, they will look for new avenues. I am sure that COVID-19 will open new avenues at some places, which even you never imagined. For example, Africa. For example, even Europe, even in America. Because America already we are talking about 60,000 people already died. We are talking about at least another 15, 20 will die. So we may expect 1 lakh deaths even in America alone. So now Donald Trump might say no more visas, but they will open up visas. So there will be a demand in other countries, other regions. So Kerala has to watch out, keep their eyes and ears open. As you rightly said, they have a blood in their mind. It's like they are addict to migration. I always say they're addict. Without migration, I don't think they will leave. So it's like an addict. So automatically they will find new alternative ways. Even they will move to Mumbai. They will move to Delhi. They can't be at home. You know, like they can't imagine they are at home. Even people who have jobs, they want to leave Kerala. 20% nurses in the Kerala government job, they are all on leave. And it is true for every government job. You can take 5-year leave. There is a provision. All officers will go somewhere. Because everybody want to leave Kerala. I think that is in their mind. I think it will continue. They will look for new opportunities, new countries. But one thing is going to happen. Kerala's health workers are known throughout the world. For example, in Ireland, out of 100 nurses in Ireland, government jobs, 80 of them are from India. Out of the 80, 60 from Kerala alone. Out of 60, 40 from one district in Kerala, Kottayam, Pathanamthitta border. So you can imagine now there will be a huge demand for Kerala nurses, also because of the Kerala model, because Kerala could little bit control the COVID-19 because only death is only 3. And we are talking about only 400 people even today. So I think people are talking, but Washington Post write editorial on Kerala, how Kerala handled COVID-19. So there will be a huge demand for Kerala doctors and nurses. Probably time will come, Keralites will not get treatment themselves in Kerala because all the good doctors might have left to other countries. So there will be a huge demand. If Kerala can improve their quality education in their medical and nursing profession, there will be a huge demand for the medical professionals, including nurses, anesthesiasts, all the health workers. So there will be, you know, at the end of the tunnel, there is some light. So there will be at least a heavy migration from Kerala, basically the medical professionals.
In fact, I'm glad you referred to the nurses' issues because there are 2-3 aspects of it. Absolutely right. Nursing or nurses, wherever you go, any part of the world, you will find Kerala denomination over there. And they are very well considered also. But there are some factors in the last 2-3 months have been, number one, the quality of nursing education that you talked about. Number 2, we found nurses had gone for a strike in Kerala because one is learned to believe that they are very poorly paid. And number 3, if you find nurses moving out of Kerala, as you rightly said, then what happens to nursing and health facilities within Kerala itself? So should there not be some dedicated kind of study and not only that, training available for nursing in Kerala?
No, I think this nurse profession, I think it requires a relook because I found there are 3 factors operating in Kerala because everybody thought nurse is the, you know, it's like it's a passport to foreign country. If you talk to any nurses who are studying, if you go to a nursing college today, who are studying the 3rd year of BSc nursing, ask them one question. After nursing, what do you want to do? They all will say, we want to go to Gulf. Why they want to go to Gulf? Because what they do normally in Kerala is that they will work after their BSc nursing or the diploma nursing 2 years in any hospital to gain experience. After the 2 years, they go to Gulf and work for 5 or 6 years. They make money and then they move to what is called the English-speaking countries. Australia, New Zealand, UK, Ireland, Canada. These are some destinations they like it. So what the Malayalis will do, because I talked to many nurses in the Gulf, I asked them, what is the final, your dream destination? They said, our destination is Ireland. But then we are using Kerala, Trivandrum to Ireland via Dubai. Trivandrum is like we have a flight. We have a lot of flight from Trivandrum to New York via Kuwait. Like that, they are using what is called the step migration. They use the Gulf as a vehicle to move. But the problem is, last few years, the Gulf also that there are not many nurses they could offer, and also Kerala Indian government had a policy not to allow nurses to go. So what happened? There was some type of issues came in, and they were all paid very low salaries. I think this is very, very important. Unless we improve the living and working condition of nurses, that requires a great attention. In fact, Balraman Committee in Kerala put a report, but it's not even being implemented because many private hospitals are not ready to pay them even the minimum wages. We are talking about minimum wages for the agricultural workers, but minimum wages after 15 years of schooling, because they do 12 years of schooling plus 2, then 3 years. 15 years of schooling, you are paid 5,000 rupees. I think it is happening in Kerala. Forget about other states. So unless you improve the conditions of the nurses in Kerala, you are going to lose them, because earlier there was no demand. COVID-19 created a demand for them. If you don't produce, if you produce a good nurse, if you don't offer them good opportunities, they will leave, and Kerala will lose them. And what will happen in the process? Kerala will not have enough nurses to treat us. So we have to look for nurses. So I think it is important for the Kerala government to discuss more on the nurse issue. Keep them in good humor. It's very important. Keep them in salaries, because I remember once someone told me in Philippines, all the school teachers were leaving the job and working as a housemaid in Saudi Arabia. So they were telling what is happening, why we don't have teachers. Then they found out teacher salary in Saudi Arabia is lower than the housemaid salary in Saudi Arabia. The salary paid to the Filipino government to their teachers is lower than the housemaid in Saudi Arabia. So the Filipino government decided we will keep our salary is equivalent to the housemaid in Saudi Arabia. So all the teachers came back. Because why they went to make money? Because why I'm teaching? I'm getting only $500. If I do the housework, I will get $10,000. So $500 difference. So they kept the salary of the teachers in Philippines equivalent to the housemaid salary in Saudi Arabia. See, I think we should think seriously like these type of policies. We should even to look at it, look at the studies on quality, what do they do, how we can have a lot of promotion. Because when one lady was telling, sir, even I work for 40 years, there is no promotion. Like we talk about finance officer, assistant finance officer, like we talk, we have assistant professor, associate professor, professor, honorary professor, like that, they don't have even positions. So we have to create them lot of ladder, lot of scales, pay scales for them. Otherwise, somebody retires as a nurse. There is no scale. So we should think of every 5 years, like we do the academic thing, we should do them. And I think people like Mr. Vinod, you should think of a good study on that and recommend the Kerala government what they should do to retain their nurses, because otherwise we are going to lose them. There will be a demand for them in the coming days because of the COVID-19.
Very interesting. In fact, you just referred to the USA also. Would it not be very worrisome, because we have large number of educated youth emigrating from India, and the change that COVID-19 is likely to bring about, especially since America, for example, has clamped down on issuances of visas. Now there we have this chunk of educated youth, we are churning them out. Our economy may not be able to absorb them in the immediate future. Their opportunities for going outside are getting blocked to a certain extent. What do you feel about that?
No, I think the visa restriction will come not just from the America. I think there will be some type of, nationalism all will come in all the countries. Like even Donald Trump said in the elections, America first. Even he now talks about America first. So there will be a many countries will stop or try to control the migration through the visas. Because you can't go to America without a visa. But then I am expecting that there will be some type of easing up after a few months. So that I don't think the business will not be as usual. That will take a lot of time. But then even the Indians used to dream to go to America. Now you may not even dream. So even the people want to go to America, the dream country has gone. Our dream to go to America, now we will not go to New York. People used to tell my son is in New York. Now they feel very sad to say. Now they are being very sad to say their children in America or children in New York, because we feel very sad. Everybody will look at you. Your daughter is fine. Your son is fine. Earlier, you are like, my son is in Washington. No, so there will be a less demand to even go to America. There will be less demand. But then what will happen? For example, in the 2008 global crisis, I went to one IIT. I went to one department. All the assistant professors were returned from America. So I asked them what happened, why he did not continue in America. They said there was no job. We came here. When we come for interview, the locals who are studied in India, they will not get jobs. Somebody is having a PhD degree from Washington, coming for an interview to IIT, and then there is a one university fellow goes, IIT, this fellow will not get, because we all look for foreign return. So these return people, if they are not interested, they will be occupying major position in India. Like even you had the CEO of, we talk about Arvind Subramanian. He was a migrant, chief economic advisor to Modi. So like that, what happened? People can come, there will be opportunities for them. It will create unemployment for the locally educated people. So that will be another aspect we should look at it. But there will be, what we call them, there will be that dream to go to America in our own mind will come down. So it will be like a matching point. But then it will all open up within 1 to 2 years. Maybe the business probably will be as usual, people start moving.
You remember last year, the government of India had introduced a draft immigration bill to 2019. The bill has not been passed. Now that kind of a bill will have to undergo a huge amount of change, and it will have to be substantial changes. And in some ways that may be a good indication for our neighboring countries also. So I think you would be called upon to advise upon that, because you had mentioned that they have talked about family migration and undocumented migrants in that draft bill, isn't it?
No, I think the immigration bill is important. We should have some policy on migrant. But unfortunately, today we have no database on migrant. I think this is what I was telling to everyone. Now, Kerala people talk about 20 lakhs, which is given by the Kerala Migration Survey. We don't have a survey like that in many states. We have implemented the survey in Tamil Nadu, Punjab, Gujarat, and Goa. So I think it is time for Indian government, basically the MEA, with the support of the, like your institute and the ILO, IOM, even the banks who are all beneficiaries of the migrant, like RBI, we should think of a India migration survey, so that we have a proper database on the international migrant. Today, we don't know how many are there. We are only talking about 20 million. It may not be true, maybe more, maybe less, we don't know. Because unless you don't know the number, you cannot make policy making, because you need evidence-based policy. Because I am trained in CDS. So you can imagine that we always talk about evidence-based policy. You cannot make a policy like a firefighting. No, you need evidence. And the evidence is missing in the international migration. We are all talking about some numbers. I remember once I went to UAE in 20 years back, I went to the ambassador. I asked him how many Indians are there. He told me, depend upon the audience, I'll give the number. If I see more people, UAE fellows, I'll tell them we are very low, sir. If I see South Asian, I'll say we are number 1. This is the number. This is what the Indian ambassador is talking about. Then I asked him, what about Kerala? He said, Kerala, we have a number. And he told my number to me, because he thought I am a different person than the one who produced the number. So this is the reality of the database. I think we should create a big database using the India Migration Survey. And one of the things the immigration bill will do is a database creation. Anybody goes from India. I was telling them, we can produce like a weather report, like a Trivandrum 35 degree, India, Ahmedabad. So we can put, because we have 45 airport, every day evening you can put, these are the people left India today. How many went to meet their family member? How many went as a student? How many went for conferences? You can put every day. It can be done, because nobody today jumping through the sea or something. Everybody goes through the proper airport with the proper document. Once you go there, you may overstay. Otherwise, everybody is going with a document. So you can produce what is called the good database. And that is also one of the importance of the immigration bill. If they want to produce the data, at the same time, they have not talked about they missed it, undocumented migrants, because they think nobody is undocumented. Because India don't want to say we are undocumented, because no country will say. Because I remember when I talked to my friends in Bangladesh and India, I have friends in Bangladesh. I asked them, Indian government says 20 million Bangladeshis are undocumented in India. If I ask the Bangladeshis, how many are there? No, sir, nobody is there. We know there are some people there. We know that there are undocumented Bangladeshis in India, but number, we are all denying. If you say Indians, even we have undocumented Indians even in America, even in UK, but we don't want to accept that, because Indian means, so I think that attitude is there. We don't have undocumented. That's why they didn't talk about undocumented family migration from Punjab. One fellow goes, all family goes to Canada. And the last one is return migration. Because if people go to countries where they don't provide citizenship, like Gulf countries, so you have to eventually return. So when you talk about migration policy, there should be a migration cycle. Pre-departure to help them to move, and then help them while they are there in the Gulf country through the Indian embassy, then eventual return, and then rehabilitation. That's why the cycle will end. Otherwise, we are only half-cooked meal. That is not help either the country or the migrants themselves.
That was very enlightening, very informative, Dr. Rajan, because I feel that, as you have rightly pointed out, unless we do not target our future studies and some of our policies based on the indices or the data that these studies will throw up, we will just be clutching in the dark, because none of these policies will be effective unless we know the numbers or the places or the targeted countries or the targeted host areas from which these migrants have been moving. And suddenly, of course, this has been an emergency. So this issue has come to the fore. But I think over a long period of time, we'll have to plan for this. So you have been exceedingly graceful. You've been very gracious with your time. Thank you very much for being with us in the Institute. And I think we will take up your advice. A senior colleague of mine was, in fact, planning in terms of a kind of a study on this. We'll try and associate with you. So, but it has been wonderful speaking to you on this and getting the huge amount of experience and expertise that you have on which we could draw upon. So thank you very much. Hopefully sometime we hope to have you join us in the Institute in Singapore also when everything opens up, because this is an aspect which needs to be discussed in greater detail, and the Institute will be looking at. Thank you very much. It was really wonderful listening to you, and you have been very gracious with your time. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you.